the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome into the latest edition of the Spot Track Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here along with the money man himself, Mike Ginnitti. Today's episode brought to you by Authentic Audio Productions. Keep that podcast running and active. Keep the costs down and the quality up. Visit AuthenticAudioPro.com or email Brandon at AuthenticAudio.com for more info. Got some suspensions to talk about. We've got quarterback news. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on. What's been popping off on the website lately? I saw Arian Foster was trending last night over on Spot Track. I have no idea. I can't find him in the news. Do you have any idea why that's happening?
I never know, but that's one of the nuggets that I love about the site, that things like that just randomly show up, and sometimes it's not the best news, so maybe you don't want to go digging too far.
I couldn't find anything. I don't know. Maybe somebody that's listening knows why he has become relevant all of a sudden, but there's nothing when you Google.
I wonder if he had a reaction to one of these suspensions, because that's a Houston guy, right?
You know what? That would make a lot of sense. So let's talk about this, and we'll talk about the Houston fella in a moment, but this one miffs me. Diontae Johnson suspended for one game. My dog going crazy over here. Suspended for one game by the Baltimore Ravens for refusing to enter the game on Sunday against Philadelphia. I mean, they brought this guy in to be an active part of the wide receiver core, I would think, or we had suspected that maybe they were just playing keep away. This would suggest that. Perhaps he was asked to go in at a point in the game when it was already well in hand, and he's like, why would I go out there? But you're a professional football player. Can you shed any more light on this? Is there anything more to this story as to why he wouldn't enter a game when he's suited up and ready to play?
No, I know nothing in terms of the specifics of that incident specifically, but I do know this. Mike Tomlin gave up on this guy, and Mike Tomlin can make, let's just say, not the best character players turn around, shut the hell up, and play good football, right? And if Mike Tomlin didn't want to go through any more trouble to make this work, that should have been red flag 1, 2, and 3. And by the way, the team that decided to take him off his hands was Carolina. That should have been red flag 4, 5, and 6. And now Baltimore tries to overcome those red flags and make him, one of the reasons why they can get to the next level for a playoff run. And obviously it's backfiring. I don't know specifically. I tried to read through the contract last night. I don't know specifically if this team conduct will void his remaining guarantees. It's only about $600,000. But I think if they do, I think Baltimore will cut bait at this point in time. That's what I know, just reading the tea leaves, that I don't imagine John Harbaugh is going to stand for any more of whatever the hell is going on. And like I said, if Tomlin couldn't go through another year with him, we all should have known out loud that this was worse than even was being stated media-wise.
Yeah, I don't know how these coaches put up with that stuff. One game suspension. If a player looked at me, I'm on the sideline, and said, "No, I'm not going in," I would never see them in my jersey again. I don't know how these coaches stand for something like that. He's only played 39 snaps for Baltimore since they acquired him from Carolina on the 29th. He has a total of 1 catch for 6 yards from the Baltimore Ravens. I guess the bigger question, and then we'll move on to some bigger news, is would this then be the end? Diontae Johnson has been a valuable commodity as far as a wide receiver out there in the NFL because of his run after the catch ability. But do you think that this would be the end of him signing any sort of significant deal if they were to cut bait and he becomes a free agent in the offseason?
I've got him as like a $10 million player, just statistically speaking. Now that needs to be updated with a couple of recent weeks, but that seems probably too high. He's probably going to be on one of those 1 for 4s at this point in time. You know what I mean? With some incentives, and just kind of latches on. What's crazy is I think this Baltimore team really needs him. Zay Flowers seems to be a one-trick pony out there. The tight ends have done a little bit better job of kind of rounding back into form for Lamar, but this is an offense that is going down, not up, after being one of the best offenses in football. So this should be the perfect platform for him to run through 10 weeks with a great team and a great quarterback, and then cash in free agency after, being paid from Pittsburgh, something they don't do very easily. They don't extend players, especially at this position, because they draft them so darn well. So for him to have garnered the extension and to now be kind of plummeting into the abyss, essentially. For me, he's a 1-year showcase contract somewhere, probably somewhere bad like Las Vegas, and we'll see if he can resurrect himself from there.
Well, I mean, and it goes to show how important attitude is. You had this guy valued at $10 million, and he's not going to sniff that after an incident like this. Next season would be George Pickens. You mentioned Pickens, so I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. This would be his next year would be a contract year for him. He'd be playing on a base salary of 1.6.
Yeah.
He's played well above that, and he is his own problem child, but he's been a fantastic wide receiver. Was this a holdout candidate? And you mentioned the Steelers don't really like to extend these guys. So what kind of situation could we be looking at in Pittsburgh in the offseason?
It's probably not a bad guess that he's gonna stay away without a contract, and he's a hell of a player. But Tomlin's been vocal about him too. You know, even just last week saying out loud, this guy's got to get his head in the right spot, or none of us are going in the place we want to go. And I can tell you right now, he should have been extended already. I think on 29 other franchises he's extended. He's going to have to work a hell of a lot harder on all facets to get an extension with Pittsburgh. I do think that's part of the reason Diontae Johnson was off this roster, though, is that they planned on paying Pickens, and there's no way they're paying two, right? So I think the plan is still to pay George Pickens, whatever that's going to be. You know, it might be comparable to what T. Higgins gets this offseason in free agency. So maybe that's a little bit of a 1-2 punch. But for me right now, the plan is still probably keep Pickens for 3 years on a guarantee and go back to the draft pool to replace Diontae Johnson. But they're making some smaller players look really good out there right now, especially with Russell Wilson in the fold. So I don't think there's too much to worry about if I'm Pittsburgh heading into 2025. And I know that's crazy because they don't have a quarterback under contract yet.
Wow, and what kind of deal are we looking at for Russell Wilson? I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the more fascinating teams when you start to project forward for an NFL offseason. They've got these guys that have exceeded their current salaries, but they're also players, George Pickens, Russell Wilson, for their own reasons. It's hard to buy into a several-year future of it working as well as it is right now. It does feel largely coaching-based, but you don't move off of good players in the NFL all that often. It's an interesting predicament they find themselves in.
Right. And part of the reason the Russell Wilson experiment is working is because of the running game, and Najee Harris is a free agent as well. So there's some serious mouths to feed here, not to mention a defense that I think has shown that it needs more depth, right? It's kind of faltered a little bit here down the stretch and probably needs a free agent or two to come in and shore up in 2025. So they're going to have to spend some serious money, which is going to require Russell Wilson to take a discount, something he has never done, literally never done in his career. It is the Aaron Rodgers syndrome all over again. Now, Rodgers did take a discount to join the Jets, and maybe now we know why, right? Because maybe he knew, outside of the dark moments, that he knew that he just was not the same player anymore. And it would have been absolutely asinine for him to go up to the $45-50 million mark. Wilson's going to have the same mindset, because he's going to have to realize that there's 4 to 5 significant contracts that have to happen around him to keep him relevant in this franchise. And I don't think there's a bidding war for Russell Wilson. I don't think there's maybe even 1 or 2 other teams out there that would vie for his services. So Pittsburgh can sit at this table knowing that they're not bidding against anybody else but themselves, and that the conversation we're having right here is probably enough to bring him down into, I don't know, is it whatever Sam Darnold garners, right? Is that maybe the counter punch here? If Darnold's getting something in the high 20s, low 30s, maybe mid 30s, can Russell Wilson live with that on a 2-year contract, 1-year guarantee? Probably. But I don't think at this point anybody can see this ship breaking apart right now, because it's just working too well, even if none of us really believe if it's real.
I love tasking you with homework for future articles on Spot Track, and this feels like we're sort of bubbling up with one here. Is there's going to be a new tier now with all these resurrected quarterbacks. There's a quarterback contract, its own grouping of the resurrected quarterback contract, and maybe Baker Mayfield's deal has already set the baseline for what this looks like. Are we good with that?
Definitely. There's actually 2 tiers. I thought you were going to go in a different direction. So there's definitely the Baker Mayfield tier. How about the aging Hall of Famer tier? Right? What do we do with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Matt Stafford and all these guys who are, you can't pay them 60. You know what I mean? Because that's just ludicrous. The NBA still pays them 60, by the way. I mean, they're just gone. They don't know what they're doing over there quite yet. They've got to fix that loophole. But football's not going to do that because of the hard cap. So what is that tier for? And maybe Russell's a bad example because, again, there's no one else really vying for his services. But if Stafford's released, and that's not crazy that Stafford gets released this offseason because the Rams want to reshuffle a lot of pieces and bring in some youth to that position. Hell, McVay could retire for all we know, right? So we may have Rodgers, Stafford, and Wilson all looking for new contracts this offseason. That's not out of the blue here. What is their value? Because you're paying for past, but also knowing that the future isn't going to be as glamorous.
Well, it's got to be a 2-year deal. I think the Jets screwed up with the 3-year contract for Aaron Rodgers. That's probably where they went wrong. So I'm going back and looking at that deal. 3 years, $112 million, 75 at signing. It would be that, but less, right? It wouldn't that be the range for that veteran aging quarterback? It's just what the Jets did, but more efficiently.
Yeah, and I don't even knock the contract with the Jets too much. The problem is you had to compound that with trade assets, with a bunch of draft picks, and when you put that all together, you just can't miss, and they missed. So it's a bad situation that got worse and worse because of PR and Hassan Reddick and whatever the hell is going on with the coaching staff and the GM stuff. But it's that's about as big of a swing and a miss as you can have, and it's going to put pause into Stafford's next destination if one has to exist, and certainly what Russell Wilson's going to get paid going forward. So it's a new wrinkle that we really haven't had, right? We haven't had this since Peyton Manning got released because of the neck injury out of Indy, and then Denver picked him up and sort of, weekend at Bernie's him to a Super Bowl with a hell of a defense and a running game. So we just don't have a lot to go off of here. The Brady stuff is a one of one. That's LeBron James in the NBA. We don't even treat that as a valuation standard. So we're getting into a situation where I think this is a legitimate tier. We just have to learn how to treat it properly from a financial perspective.
I don't know if I'm comfortable with how much you breezed past his record-breaking season to just straight to the weekend at Bernie's season. We're just going to skip over the fact that he was actually really good with Denver before the legs went out.
All right. I was just trying to get cute there.
That was the perfect way to put it. Okay, last thing on the Steelers, because now you got me going on them. They're a good example of something that I don't think we talk about as much in the sports world as we used to, because now everybody's so rich. But the motivation for a new contract used to be something that was, I think, more heavily focused on that contract year and seeing a guy really pop off right before that. The Steelers might have this perfect cauldron, and it could be one of the underlying secrets to their success that they have multiple guys that are vying for that next contract, not just one here and there, but at pivotal positions. Is that something that you think is maybe flying under the radar with the Pittsburgh Steelers? No,
they're playing hungry. And I think Mike Tomlin, it was pretty well known that he was on the hot seat entering 2024 because things were starting to slide a little bit. And everybody in that organization is extremely hungry, extremely proud. And that definitely bore out. It's a metric we've used in fantasy before, right? Give me a running back who needs a contract. Give me a wide receiver who's looking for $40 million. So there's no question that's still a part of the game. But you're right. This seems to be the biggest compilation from a roster standpoint of players that should need this. And by the way, it's funny that Diontae Johnson was one of those players and still couldn't fit the bill, right? So again, another red flag that he couldn't stick with the Steelers organization. By the way, we're missing a player who will be entering a contract season in 2025 and probably won't show up until he gets a new deal. And that would be TJ Watt, who's
talk about hungry,
30 years and 1 month old. And by the way, Micah Parsons will be negotiating his contract at the same time. So the Watt Parsons conversation, that might be bigger than any Brock Purdy conversation we're going to have, right? Because this is going to be probably back to back the two biggest non-quarterback contracts in the history of football. And more reason for Russell Wilson to have to take a bit of a team discount here, no question.
Nothing will be bigger than the Purdy conversation, but I appreciate the gumption nonetheless. The other suspension of note involves a nasty hit to Trevor Lawrence. The NFL upheld the 3-game suspension to Houston Texans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair despite his attempt at an appeal. So no surprise here. The NFL didn't change anything with the ruling.
All right. A little off topic here because you're a big radio guy. Do you have to practice these name pronunciations off air before you get on air? Because I always feel like I'm going to screw the pooch, and I do 50% of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. That's all I wanted to know.
You have to. The first thing. So what I do, okay, now we're peeling back the curtain, because when I've seen this player, but I don't talk about him, so it doesn't roll off the tongue. I just, it's maybe Scott Hansen will mention it on Red Zone, and then we move on with our day, if even that.
I mean, you're in the Tua market. That had to be like the biggest test case ever, right?
Right, for sure. And sometimes some sites that you go to, or you go to the team site, they'll actually have a button that you can click for the name pronunciation. That's very helpful, but it's few and far between. I usually just go to a YouTube clip. I'm watching highlights, and I want to hear professional broadcasters. The mistake you don't want to make is go to some random podcast that pops up on YouTube and bank off of the way they say the name.
I like
it's definitely, you can't just go in blind. And believe me, there's a lot of names out there. I do it all the time, but you definitely have to practice this stuff.
Well, as somebody who named his company Spot Track, I can sympathize. So.
I've definitely had to, as we continue to peel back, we have somebody on the iHeart side. I don't even know what he looks like, but I email him when I want new bits of production done. And I've learned that I have to spell out the pronunciation. I've definitely had to kick back a few spot tracks in the past for the intro that you have on my show. All right. That's all part of it.
So yeah, Trevor Lawrence
back to the linebacker, but the NFL upheld it. I mean, the appeals process in the NFL might be the biggest clown show. Like, why they even have it? The people that are setting the ruling are the ones that are taking the appeal. Yeah. It rarely goes the way of the player.
So then, am I reading the tea leaves that you think this is too aggressive, this 3-game suspension?
I don't. I think if you were to just look at the play in a vacuum, I think getting kicked out of the game and then a 1-game suspension would be appropriate. Yeah. But I like the way the NFL laid it out. This is not just because of this hit. This is because of repeated behavior. And once we look into someone's past and we're not happy with the way they've been conducting themselves, and especially in terms of player safety, then you have to take more corrective measures. It's the same thing if you were to go to court for a misdemeanor for a crime that you've never committed before, and then there's somebody next to you that does it once every other week, you're going to get different penalties from the judge. And in that sense, I agree with the NFL.
If this was, if he had made the hit to Travis Etienne, are we having a different conversation?
I don't think so, just because he's got a pattern of behavior. And I've now watched, and I didn't realize this. This is all learned information for me, but I've watched people are very quick to put these highlight packages together. He's a dirty player. Yeah. Might be a great guy. I don't know anything about him, but he's a dirty player, and he has multiple instances where he takes shots at guys. Happened earlier this year.
Yeah, with Caleb
Tony
Williams.
Pollard was.
Yeah, there's a few. Caleb Williams, Tony Pollard. You're right, Brandon.
Nasty. And so it's somebody that is just out there playing recklessly. I think you have to take that sort of stance, no matter who he was going up against. It's a bigger story because of the hit on Trevor Lawrence, but I think the suspension would be the same.
I'm with it. The backlash from the other side that people are saying that Lawrence pulled up too late and all that, that's probably got to stop, right? I mean, because
did you see the Tom Brady clip? He was on Cowherd's show.
I don't want to go there. I can't believe we're going there, but that's not a good look in my opinion. I get it. Lawrence is a $55 million player. He slid a little later than I think most quarterbacks would have. He didn't slide properly. He did have himself exposed. Those conversations can happen, but not in a sense to say that all of this is too egregious towards Al-Shaair. It's not, right? I mean, like he's been properly disciplined for everything you just laid out. He's forfeited $340,000, by the way, to keep the financials in this thing. But I will say this. There's going to be a growing interest in making sure that these quarterbacks don't get touched. That these are officially like the pedestal children now, right? They are these $60 million players when 52 other men on their roster are making 4 and 5, if that, right? Most making 900,000. It's just where we are now, you know. And I spoke on your show a little bit. The NBA had a big 6-7 year run with this when Kobe was way above everybody else financially speaking, and was getting all the calls. And of course, he's a Laker, so it's all top shelf. First hit take. The league's doing this on purpose, and they're going to continue to do this stuff on purpose. So when you come near a quarterback, and especially when you do so in a way that Al-Shaair did, they're going to come down way harder than they would in any other instance because they've got to protect their investments. And look, you've got league officials talking about quarterback salary caps. You've got people starting to actually treat these players differently in every regard, business and football sense. There's just no getting out of this, right? And by the way, the guy who adjudicated the suspension, Ramon Foster, a former guard who had to protect quarterbacks for a living, there's just no way out of this. That's not an accident either. That's not an accident, Brandon. That guy's there because of this exactly. They need to make sure that quarterbacks are top billion in every regard.
You know, in that sense, I do think the suspension would be the suspension no matter the player the hit was against. But getting kicked out of the game as quickly as he did, perhaps that was because it was a hit on a quarterback. Taking the slide out of the game, that was the conversation that Brady tried to insert into the chat, so to speak. That might be ridiculous, but the idea that we need to maybe have a longer conversation about more running quarterbacks, also trying to keep quarterbacks safer, those two things don't jive. Yeah. And this wasn't a play like you see with Josh Allen, who's impervious to pain, so he's a bad example, but this wasn't somebody that was trying to juke out a defender. He was giving himself up, but you are seeing more running quarterbacks, so you would think that the quarterback injuries are going to go up rather than down. A lot of the rules protect the quarterback in the pocket, but if the quarterback's going to leave the pocket routinely, then how do you go about keeping that investment safe? Because they probably need, I don't know what exactly the answer is, but I think there is something to that. There's a conversation to have. If you're going to protect the investment, then you might have to change the style of the quarterback. Yeah,
I don't disagree with that. I think Brady hit on that pretty well as well during his coward appearance, which is, these guys just can't be moving around anymore. And, he didn't do a lot of moving around himself. And certainly that's a selfish, biased take, but it's not wrong, right? I mean, if this is what you get, right, it's somewhat of a load management conversation. You know what I mean? And these guys aren't going to sit out, but that element of the game might decrease heavily. And I think for some of the top quarterbacks in the league, Mahomes specifically, it has decreased quite a bit. Now he still comes out of the pocket, but he doesn't go downfield that much anymore. And that's not an accident. That's probably a conscious move that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes' agent and Patrick Mahomes' wife and a lot of people have probably come together collectively and said, we just don't need to do that. There's talented ways to play the game without having to make those plays. And we'll throw a 7th round running back out there and Isaiah Pacheco and let him do that dirty work for you. So yeah, you're not wrong. It's one of those things that will evolve, but at the same time, Brandon, if you look across the league right now, what is it? 40% of the starting quarterbacks are mobile quarterbacks right now. So there's a influx of college players that are, that are not that, right? That are still run first, non-passing pocket quarterbacks. So a lot's going to have to change within the pipeline before something significant changes in the NFL. And you're right, it's probably going to lead to more injury.
Now, the good news is, outside of all of this, mass hysteria because one quarterback got hurt, this is not like last year. We dealt with this a lot more than we're dealing with it this year. So I think we should take a moment as football fans and sports appreciators and just take a moment to appreciate the fact that pretty much every star quarterback in the league is healthy right now.
Yeah.
It's great for the league.
Yeah, this time last year we were marveling at Joe Flacco because of what he was doing as a step-in quarterback, and we're not doing that right now. We're focused on Allen and Mahomes and Jackson and Hurts and Jared Goff. You're right. It's a big conversation that at least for 2024 things have gone the way the league wants them to go.
Yeah, outside of Dak, but Trevor Lawrence is now effectively out for the season. What do you expect a Jacksonville offseason to look like as they, he'll be healthy. This is just more precautionary than anything in the fact that their season is over. Get yourself a good draft pick and all of that. But they've got a lot of changes to make. This roster going into the season, we thought it was pretty talented. It's not. They have to rehaul that. And you're probably looking at a new head coach as well.
I was going to say, this is your market. Is that still the sense? Is the Doug Peterson era going to be over? They're just kind of letting him ride it out right now?
That's definitely the case.
Okay. So that's where it starts. And then obviously from there, it's going to have to be somebody who is a bit of a Trevor Lawrence apologist because he's got 4.5 years guaranteed in his contract. So there's no changing that, at least without a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of help. That they do project to have the number 1 overall pick right now. And that could mean a trade out. because you need 8 pieces, not one right now. Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, not going to change the course of Jacksonville. That's just a fact. You've got a Travis Etienne decision to make. You've got certainly some wideout decisions to make, and you've got a defense that you tried to pay for and buy this offseason, and I think it's gone terribly bad. So it's a complete start over. They did just extend Walker Little, their offensive tackle, to a nice little 2-year guarantee. So you can see that they're starting to poke a little bit right now, even in November, December. But it's a step back. Maybe allocate a whole bunch of draft picks to this and next season, and try to rebuild this thing as quickly as possible with Trevor Lawrence in mind. Not unlike maybe what we've seen in Arizona the past 2 off seasons. Right?
Arizona, I think the LA Chargers are a good example of this. You pare it down a little bit. You still put enough pieces in place to let your quarterback thrive and find the right coach that can bring that out of him. Jim Harbaugh has done wonders to reestablish Justin Herbert as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
There you go. That's what it takes. They just got to find that guy.
I'm curious. You were a little bit cold the other day when we spoke on the Chicago Bears head coaching opening. Where do you think? Where would Jacksonville rank comparatively to a team like Chicago as far as the top candidate wanting to go and be the head coach of that quarterback and that franchise?
Yeah, it's definitely below. I'd put Chicago quite a bit ahead, even though, Trevor Lawrence has shown fairly good strides this year after what can be considered a step back last year. But I don't know. I was trying to, after I got off your show talking about some of the coaching stuff, I kind of put some work into this. I know people are saying there's going to be 7-8 vacancies. Are we sure about that? I'm just not positive anymore. I mean, the Jets is easily the worst destination right now, in my opinion, because there's so many moving parts and a new GM coming in and blah, 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 right? That seems to be the bottom of the barrel.
The Raiders would be bottom of the barrel.
They're probably going to move on. Okay, so the Raiders are in that boat. I would say
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville's they're in that tier, I guess. Dallas might be, a mid-team conversation, but Jerry's kind of speaking otherwise right now, so we'll see what happens in that regard.
Carolina's kind of interesting because they've turned it around a little bit, but there's ownership is still not one you want to work with.
Yeah, and then I mentioned New England on your show. I'm not sure Mayo has done the job that they need to get what should be an unbelievably aggressive offseason. They have ample cap space, ample draft picks, and Drake May's a hit. So
he's a Patriot guy. I can't see Bob Kraft moving off of him after one season.
I don't know. We'll see who becomes available, and because Drake May is a destination right now. That's one of those places that college coaches / offensive coordinators out there right now would be seeking out, along with Caleb Williams, of course. And again, Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville are easily a tier below that. Tennessee's a mess if that one becomes available. The Saints, I don't know, man. That one's right in the middle for me because it could go either way with that division. But we'll see. There's moving parts. Here's another one to put out there, and it's starting to grow some sentiment. But if Zach Taylor gets ousted in Cincinnati,
I could see that.
The Joe Burrow stuff that's fun because you've got a guy who's throwing for 350, 400. I think you're going to pay Chase. That's maybe a conversation for next week because I'm going to do some wide receiver bubbles here soon. And then that defense just has to get bulked up. So it's a better version of Jacksonville, really, if you want to put it in those comparative terms. But that's one to watch for me right now as we kind of approach week 15.
Writing down wide receiver bubbles as we speak right now. Let's get to our quick hits to wrap today's episode. The Miami Heat just completed their 4th largest victory in the history of their franchise, and it was against LeBron James and the LA Lakers, who are sliding quickly. His legs seem to be leaving him. I don't know if he's just tired or if he's 39 and age is finally catching up with him. Is the decline happening right in front of our very eyes?
I'm going to zag and say no. Even though I think it's clear as day that something's going on. This just seems like the time of year where LeBron takes off, right? I mean, he knows what's happening. Now, look, the team as a whole can't let things slide too far, but my God, it's so hard to not get in the postseason now. You know what I mean? Or at least the playing game. It's just so hard. There's so many opportunities to sneak in the back. So I do think LeBron is pumping the brakes a little bit here. He has his moments. But the team as a whole is just going through a slump. There's no question about it. And part of that is his age, and part of that is maybe trying to figure out this JJ Redick stuff a little bit, which is pretty new and pretty fresh. And maybe there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that I'm not alluding to here. But for me, it just seems like the time of year that a 39-year-old superstar just says, let's just moonwalk a little bit for a few weeks.
Well, there's just not a lot of precedent. We don't have a lot of 39-year-old superstars that walk around in the NBA. But he's one of his last 23 from 3-point range right now. Not pretty. And, the legs are the first thing to go. Okay. Have you given any more thought to the golden bat rule that Rob Manfred proposed at the winter meetings? If it were to pass, I'll throw it to you this way, because I know that you hate it. And, of course, it's your show. Feel free to sound off on that. But could there be a financial shift for the best players in the game if we were to see something like this? Well,
it would mean essentially more plate appearances for these players, right? So I guess there'd be something to it. But no, I don't think. Come on, this is baseball, right? They're not going to change their financial structure for anything, let alone a golden at-bat rule. I've given myself 48 hours or so to digest this a little bit and listen to some people talk about it and have some fun.
And you love it now?
No, I hate it. I absolutely loathe it. I don't anything in this category that that's this sandlot category. I'm not even around to the start the runner at second base rule. Even though I know it's good for the game, we can't have 18 inning overtime or extra innings and stuff like that. I'm fine with that. It's a long season. I'm just not there from a baseball standpoint, but this one, I don't think I can ever get myself to this one. And to me, the basketball comparison is the best one, right? There's no world where with 2 minutes left in a game and a foul-a-thon is happening, a hack-a-shack is happening, that you foul Shaq, but you can let Kobe Bryant take the free throws, right? That's what this is. That's what this is. And
so you're looking at this the wrong way. What baseball is trying to do is in the last moment of a game, you use the basketball comparison. If you're down to the last 5 seconds and the Warriors have the ball, you know who's touching the rock. It's Steph Curry. And in baseball, you don't have that opportunity. That would be the reason for it. It's goofy and it does feel sandlotty and definitely goes against traditionalist views of the game of baseball. But that's why you would do it. You want to put your stars on TV in the most pivotal moments, and baseball isn't set up that way.
So let me ask you this, okay? There's one out in the ninth. Juan Soto, New York Mets superstar Juan Soto is the second batter in the inning. Okay, he goes up there. He strikes out. There's 2 outs. They can put him back up there for the third at bat. A back-to-back. He can have a back-to-back at bat.
And okay. You don't think that would be awesome?
Oh my God. All right, fine. In May and June, it would be phenomenal. This can't be anywhere near September, October, and November. Is that fair? Is that fair?
I'm good with that.
All right.
I also developed my own wrinkle to the rule. You can't take a player off the base paths and put them back at the plate. If they're on base, they have to stay there. But otherwise, I thought about the back-to-back at bat idea, and I think that's great. Yeah. Right. Oh, Shohei Ohtani just a fly out to center field. Guess what? You got to pitch to him again. Too bad.
But not before a pitching change, right? Not before a pitching change. This was floated a week before winter meetings. It is what it is, right? It's a bit of a marketing ploy. They like to do this stuff. Has this been as fun as a radio talking point as I think it could be? Like, are people eating this thing up?
Big time. I've had full blown conversations about how if this happens, you got to have an actual golden bat, and that becomes part of what does the bat look like? This is and that's the fun of it. I don't care if this idea ever passes, but I just like the fact that baseball's throwing this stuff out there. Give us something to talk about with your sport in the offseason. Yeah. Like this. Joe Burrow just admitted that he spent $3 million on a Batmobile from the movie The Dark Knight. I guess at $219 million guaranteed, we shouldn't be overly concerned with his spending habits, but your thoughts on the purchase?
Did you watch the video clip where he says this?
I saw it, but I haven't actually listened to it.
So he's just at a random practice and he's just kind of chilling with some teammates, and it just randomly comes up in conversation. Like, hey, by the way, I bought a Batmobile. You know what I mean? Like we would say, hey, I went and saw a movie last night. Oh, I just bought a Batmobile. What? Yeah, I spent $2.9 million on a Batmobile. And the guy he's talking with is like, well, are you going to get the cape? Are you going to get the suit to go with it? And they're in the middle of a practice having a random conversation. I guess that's the Bengals 2024 season in a nutshell right there, right? But yeah, this is just what these players can do now with their lives because of everything we've been talking about, right? I mean, he's just a weird, unbelievably talented and highly paid dude. And this is one of the things he could be spending the money a hell of a lot worse. Let's put it that way.
That's true. And this is part of the reason why we're not seeing players go broke as much as we used to in the past, because you can spend $3 million on a Batmobile and still be just fine.
By the way, hold on. Not a terrible investment. Is Batman ever going to go out of style? You're like, this is a flippable item for life, right?
It's a replica from the movie. I think if it was from the movie itself,
okay, that
would be more of an investment. I don't know that a replica is going to increase in value. So I'm going to go with no, because it's not a collector's item.
I don't know, man.
If it was from the movie, you'd have a different case. But this is just a Batmobile, not the Batmobile.
Man, I didn't realize it was going to get this serious, but I guess I'll agree with you.
It's highly suggest you watch the show King of Collectibles on Netflix with Ken Golden, who runs Golden Auctions. You'll learn a lot about this stuff. It's very good. It's very sports driven. Highly recommend it. That's the Brandon Kravitz recommendation of the week. Keep the cost down and the quality up. AuthenticAudioPro.com. Level up your podcasting efforts. And do us a favor, subscribe and rate the pod you're enjoying right now. And make sure you visit SpotTrack.com for all of the latest in the sports contractual world. Till next time, Mike, I'm going to go hop in my Batmobile.
Thanks.